All right, folks. Yeah, a lot of content, a lot of stuff. Take a deep breath, relax. It's going to be the ever exciting topic of compliance in the cloud era. So hopefully we can make this somewhat exciting. But I guess starting with you, Usman, because we'll go this way. Could you introduce yourself? Talk about your role, and yeah, we'll start there. I'll ask some more questions.
Sounds good. That's an easy question. I guess we start with that.
Yeah, we'll start off with softball.
Yeah, so my name is Usman Qureshi. I'm a partner engineer at Google Cloud. My role is around creating better together stories with our partners in our partner ecosystem, whether it's networking, security, automation, and things along those lines. So we closely partner up with HashiCorp and on numerous things, from lifecycle management to security to automation. So good to be here.
Okay, fantastic. And Brian, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Jake. Brian Hobbs, Vice President at Leidos, where I currently oversee our portfolio of all of our enterprise applications. Quick show of hands. I think I can see hands. Anybody see a Leidos logo anywhere on your way to this event? Anybody? Anybody? No. Airports, when you go through those scanners, look at the top. See what you see there, okay? It's going to say Leidos, but I don't really want you to think of Leidos as that company, okay? Leidos really is an innovation company at its heart. And by innovation, we mean that we solve a lot of hard problems. That just happens to be one of many hard problems that are solved by Leidos. So we go to markets largely in the federal space, but not exclusively. Our portfolio is very broad, covering down from health to DoD and Intel, and expanding across the globe into commercial and international markets as well. Jake, thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So actually, like before this talk and seeing the things in the airport, who actually knows what Leidos does aside from that? I mean, Melissa, you guys don't count. Well, you definitely count because they're part of our federal team. Yeah. So fascinating enough. I think this is. I don't know if the tagline came from you or if it came from one of your folks, other folks. Is that they're the largest government contractor in the world. Right. So, and the other thing, I was doing some research. Is it true? You guys started off as, was it SAIC?
SAIC.
Right. So if you've heard that company name, SAIC, like I found that recently doing some research, and I was like, oh, I'd never heard of Leidos before. Maybe that's part of the thing. Yeah. So,
right.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, cool. Thanks a lot for joining us here. Highly regulated environments. Who works in a highly regulated environment here? And hope to see lots of hands. All right. Is anybody wanting to work in a highly regulated environment that has their hands down? I guess be careful what you ask for, but sort of increasingly, with all the security threats that are happening within the world, I think compliance is kind of forefront. I guess maybe just kind of talk about some of the experiences that you're having with your customers where compliance is kind of driving some of their capabilities, some of the requests, like some things, just maybe some observations you see in the market currently. Brian, I'll start with you.
Sure. Actually, let me start with corporately. We have a certain responsibility as a publicly traded company, right? So we inherit a lot of responsibility through those compliance controls. And then when you think about our customers, when we work for them, we wind up inheriting typically more controls that they will insist on for whatever solution we're delivering. Okay. So it's really multifaceted when you're an SI at scale, where you have a lot of compliance to cover down on from your own corporation vantage point, and then it just gets multiplied as you go to scale with all the different programs in all the different markets. So think about what I said just a moment ago. We've got programs in health, so all things health compliance are now interesting, relevant, and really important to us. When we're doing things in defense, everything that the Defense Department thinks is important and levies on us vis-a-vis the programs that we're working on, those compliance requirements then become important to us as well. So you can see how this problem, when it's multifaceted like this, becomes really, really challenging when you're at scale doing this over and over again.
And I guess in that context, maybe I'll come back to the commonalities. Usman, I'm just kind of curious from your perspective, from Google's perspective, what you're seeing in these highly regulated industries, how you kind of approach this and what you're seeing for requests from your customers?
Yeah, I mean, just as Brian said, right? So they're looking from a mission and from a corporate perspective. As a cloud provider, you have a responsibility to provide an infrastructure that meets all the controls that, from a compliance perspective, that customers need to run their application, on. So services like that need FedRAMP Moderate, FedRAMP High, IL4, IL5, IL6 level services. Similarly, on the IC side, certifications. And then if you look at EU with all the GDPR regulations, as well as their open strategic autonomy initiatives around keeping data sort of in-house. So from a cloud provider perspective, if you're providing infrastructure, you have to ensure the baseline infrastructure meets all those requirements, right? So if you think about public cloud, you can meet it to a certain point, but with respect to a lot of countries are coming back and asking, hey, we want to make sure the data stays within our control, right? Stays within our boundaries. So we are even getting into that space to provide cloud-like services within on-prem infrastructure, but at the same time providing like a managed service, right? So if you start looking at AI workloads, especially these days with Gen AI, customers are already looking for, okay, I want to run, especially nation state, right? Public sector, even financial customers. And then even in Europe and APAC, there are customers that are looking for those kind of functions. So providing that infrastructure at scale is highly important to run their workload. So we are really at the forefront to make sure, at least at the infrastructure layer perspective, all those controls that customers are inheriting, we make sure we address those. And then when customers, from a Brian perspective, or from customers that are deploying applications on top of these infrastructures, they can then focus on making sure their applications are compliant. So it's kind of like working together with customers in that respect, but at least they're inheriting most of our controls from us.
Yeah, and this is the follow-up that I wanted to ask was what are the commonalities? Because I think this permutation of all these different nations, you're working with lots of different governments, you're working with different governments and all the different corporations and whatnot that are in there. What are some of the commonalities that you find between all those environments that kind of helps you maybe have some reusability between between your solutions? Is there particular commonalities that you just kind of witness?
There is. They do sometimes become fairly particular to the market that they're in. So within given markets, you can find opportunities for efficiency if all of your compliance requirements are derived out of one market or another. And then again, at scale, if you can do things corporately to really empower those varied program teams, then you're really starting to get that flywheel going. Right. So when you understand we've got commonality in this market and commonality in this market, but corporately we want to power both of these teams, you have a least common denominator opportunity to use Terraform, to use Vault, to manage these key cloud compliance and security issues that come up time and time again in compliance audits or security audits, right? So when you have that kind of operating model that you need to power many different program teams at scale, you have to do what you're suggesting, which is find commonality at every layer and work at that lowest common denominator value.
Right, and I'm just kind of curious, what are the most, is there the most stringent market from a compliance standpoint that you typically work with? I don't know if I want to throw anybody on their bus here, but are there particular environments you think that are more challenging than others?
I don't personally. Okay. Compliance is compliance. Okay. If you're doing it right, you should be able to get through audits fairly passively if you're doing it right. I'm most familiar with the DoD and Intel, so of course those are incredibly stringent, but I wouldn't say it's any more so than any other regulator would expect, honestly.
So this is more, if you have a clear definition, lowest common denominator controls, and some of those processes that implement those things, it helps kind of make it a little bit normalized across the board. It's not so irregular between all these various customers and so, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Usman, what do you see from your side of things in terms of how it is that you you get asked from these customers for some of these controls, and where specifically do you help out there?
Yeah, I think the biggest factor that we are helping out with is providing, I come from an operations background, right? So the funny story is I worked for SCIC for a while, I think 6 years back in the day. And I was on the infrastructure side, managing infrastructure. I think one of the challenges from an infrastructure perspective, and it's a nice, Brian, you focus on the application side, so I think it's a nice kind of combo here. But from an infrastructure perspective, the challenge was okay, you got to worry about compute, storage, virtualization, networking, and things along those lines. And you have to make sure all those controls are in place for all that stack that you're building, right? So you're building the stack from the ground up, and then you got to make sure all the compliance requirements are met within authentication, encryption, data at rest encryption, and automation as well from a scripting perspective, from an infrastructure to the code perspective. So I think as a cloud provider, our role is to provide I hate to use this word, but easy button for customers to leverage the infrastructure, a built infrastructure that has already been gone through the auditing process. And then we work with providers like Terraform to make sure when the applications are deployed are also compliant. So then we are leveling up the conversation with the customers to having application level, use case level, mission-focused conversations where we can work with them and with you all to make sure things are being deployed in a very secure manner. And then the compliance cycle, life cycle management is critical, right, in that process as well. So making sure as they're adding more features, functions, that they're not deviating away from their posture, security posture perspective. So I think that's where partnership with Terraform and HashiCorp in general makes things easy by bringing those package solution together to customers.
Yeah, I think this is key, Jake. We can't overstate this. When we talk new paradigm, we should be striving towards turning governance and risk and compliance into something different from what it is today. I mean, you joked about it at the onset, right?
Yeah.
But with technologies like the ones that Hashi provides, there's an opportunity to automate these processes that over time have become challenging for people and driven people to make silly jokes about it. But we really are at a point in time now where automation can make the job of the practitioner much more, dare I say, enjoyable, or at least fulfilling, because they're using technology. They're not going to, ask Mary what the answer is to the silly question that the auditor asked, yesterday, right? You have the ability right now, at this point in time, to use automation to really help your GRC teams. And final point here, I mean, no company is going to invest millions and millions of dollars to be innovative in the GRC space, unless you're a GRC applications vendor, right? So companies that have these requirements want to do compliance at the least practical cost possible, right? So you want to be exactly as compliant as you're required. You don't want to overinvest there. So this is where it's key to understand the total cost of not just your tooling, but the time of your people required in audits and maintaining your compliance. So I think we are at a point in time where this is an opportunity to fundamentally change how GRC is viewed.
Yeah, and so one of the patterns I see often within the financial industry, and we're starting to see it spread out into other industries as well, as the concept of automation isn't just the speed of market, it's really the reduction of variance between systems, right? So if I think about a control system where I've got 10 different humans doing 10 the same job over and over again, it's likely that they're going to vary some way in the way that they're delivering those things. And so from an auditing perspective, now you've got to look at each of those separate iterations and find out, did they follow the process? Are they adhering to those particular controls? And I'm just kind of curious, how it is, you've mentioned automation and what that what that leverages of being able to say removing those human elements from each of those control points. What do you see both from a an audit standpoint or reporting standpoint and some of the automation that you guys are employing there? I'm just kind of curious, what do you see a reduction in audit times? And do you have any scaling factors for anything like that?
Sure, I'll start if you don't mind, Usman.
Absolutely.
But let's think about it through the lens of how much time it takes to get a practicing team up and running. So if we invest time on the forefront to develop compliant options for any given program team, least common denominator, then we can, and we have been able to bring that cycle time down greatly from many weeks to get a team up and running to a few days, right? So when you invest your time at the forefront, you're able to see, massive return on the back end. So that's one scaling factor that is incredibly important when you're operating hundreds of different programs in vastly different markets, all that have different compliant requirements.
Okay.
Yeah, and from our perspective, what we see is just the labor cost that gets reduced, right? So instead of your labor, 10 people focused on generating a report for your auditors, you're creating these sort of automation tools or using these automation tools to, for a couple of people who can manage that reporting structure, and the other folks can actually manage and maintain the application, like the business applications for the users that are using those business application, right? So your business cares about the deliverables and how much revenue a company is bringing, or how much if it's a a mission-based service, how much consumers are getting or citizens are getting benefit from that service.
Yeah.
So now you can put more energy towards actually the core innovation versus just creating audit reports, right? So I think we see a lot of reduction just from a labor cost perspective, where you need a couple of people to do the auditing, and then the other folks can actually focus on delivering the mission, so to speak.
Yeah. Do you all actually work with any of the auditors with any experience of what it's like to train auditors to think about automation as being a much more secure, compliant method of doing that? I'm just kind of curious if either of you do. I didn't ask you this question beforehand, but is that something you guys see from an audit perspective, actually how you interact with those auditors?
So I work with auditors in my past life. I haven't worked with them in a while since the automation has sort of. But really? I can see. I think with any new tool or any new mechanism that you're trying to, or any new process that you're trying to introduce, there's a learning curve. Yeah. But I think it's an easy learning curve. Like for example, I meet a lot of people that are just getting into automation today.
Yeah.
And one of the things they're using is Gen AI to generate HashiCorp templates, Terraform templates, right? Yeah. Just to start off with those templates. So I think some of the newer AI tool sets that are available are just going to accelerate how these people are going to learn. I think just from a learning perspective. And I think that's just going to improve the experience. I don't know, I don't have the real-time stat on it, but I think that's where, that's how I am learning. That's if I don't know anything, I'm asking, LLMs and say, okay, I see this report, can you help me decipher this report? Now, obviously, in a regulated environment, you can't do it on, open technologies. You want to make sure those technologies are deployed on-prem. Yeah. But those technologies exist, for that particular purpose to make your life easier. So I think it's an evolution that auditors will hopefully adopt, but I think that's how I think about it.
I've not had the opportunity to see how auditors are trained. Would love to hear how that works. If anybody knows, please see me afterwards. Would love to understand that a little bit better. But I can say, with our most recent ISO audit, for example, I really did feel like the auditors had a much more open mind than we may have seen in the past. Okay. Understanding that things are different, understanding that automation provides new opportunities for us to show things. You were mentioning drift detection. So this is a key element of getting through your audits, when you can prove things and when you have understanding auditors. That's really when you start to see audits happen quicker, right? Yeah. Quicker, and people aren't walking out with their head down because it was a healthy conversation between those required to do the audit and those understanding the requirement and practicing what's required to meet those requirements.
Yeah, and the reason I ask, and if you have insights from the audience, please approach us afterwards, because one of the biggest challenges I typically find in the automation side is that those auditors have to be trained, like you were saying, like that, whether it's through ChatGPT or just through working with their clients. That's a very front-loaded effect. And then sometimes you get young auditors that are, they're kind of the entry level into that area, so maybe they get promoted somewhere else. But I have, I've just kind of heard some challenges around training up those auditors. If anybody has some of the hacks, I've heard a couple different ones that folks have done out there. Please let us know. But get those auditors up to the training. So we haven't really been focused. You guys both mentioned products. It's sort of interesting from a discipline standpoint. I've been talking very abstractly, but is there anything specifically about what it is that HashiCorp does? If you want to talk about specific products, great, or just from HashiCorp's approach in general, like why is it that you think we can help you get compliant faster within your programs? Usman, I'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the key areas we are sort of investing in is, we from a, digital sovereignty is a really key initiative that's happening across the globe, right? And we think from a sovereignty perspective, we think about 3 pillars, right? So we have data sovereignty, we have operational sovereignty, and then we have software sovereignty. So data sovereignty is where customers want to make sure they have complete control of their data. They want to make sure that the keys that they're using to encrypt the data, they manage those keys. From an operational perspective, customers want to have complete control and visibility into a provider's what the provider is doing within their tenant, so to speak. And then software, I think sovereignty is around no external dependence. If a customer is running a workload, they don't want to be dependent on a provider's software tool or managed services, right? So how do you create this sort of harmony across these 3 pillars, right? So one of the things we are doing from that perspective is, especially in a highly regulated environment, we're talking about ICD 503, 703, or FedRAMP high or IL6 plus certifications, or highly regulated environments in EU. We have a product called Google Distributed Cloud, air-gapped, which is a solution that is for, it's in the name, right? A solution that can be deployed in completely air-gapped environments, where you don't need, if you have a high requirement around no network connectivity, that's where it gets deployed. And one of the things we are doing is we have this concept of marketplace within, because we are trying to create like a cloud-like environment for customers that have those requirements. And within that marketplace, we have HashiCorp Terraform and Vault that is available for customers to easily deploy, right? So our job is to make customers to easily consume these things that they're already using, right? They might already be using Terraform, they might already be using Vault for their existing on-prem infrastructure. So how do we harmonize sort of that story? And I think creating that marketplace sort of version of it makes the user journey really easy, right? So now customers don't have to worry about, okay, I have to self-deploy this Terraform thing, I have to self-deploy this Vault thing. We sort of take the ownership and make the customer experience sort of easy. Because I think that's our job, is to make a customer experience easy and enjoyable, right, from our perspective. That's how we think about it on how to make things easy for customers.
Yeah, perfect. Brian, how's HashiCorp, or product specific or not? How do you think we're helping you in this?
Yeah, well, at Leidos, either corporately or through one of our many programs, we're using nearly the entire product suite from Hashi. What I like about the product suite is the way that it helps practitioners shift left and think about doing things right up front. You bring security into the conversation early, and you get your configs established, and then your infrastructure becomes much more manageable. You have much less drift because you have tooling that you can detect that. You're probably securely and efficiently managing your secrets, right? So what it does, the suite does a lot of great things in and of themselves, but it offers the opportunity to help the industry, again, bring bring these compliance requirements farther to the left and think about them so that you can take advantage of the automation that we've been talking about here today, right? So I think that's a key aspect here that might not be as explicit as some of the specific products, and there's plenty of sessions to hear about them, right? But understanding that the suite is designed to do a lot of things, and if the practitioners understand those things and we execute the shift left, we're all going to be way better off than we are right now.
Yeah, shifting left. In some aspects, I don't want to overburden the developers. I think, giving those capabilities to as close to the delivery process and creating those regular processes is great. And I don't want to make fun of your shift left. Is like sometimes I'm like, if we shift everything left, like nobody else is gonna have a job of developers, right? Like it's dev plus everything else. That's right. Okay, so like, what can we do better? Like, this is kind of an open thing. I call it a magic wand. If you were to wave a magic wand, it's specifically in the context of something like regulatory environments. Like, what could we at HashiCorp do better to help you get to your compliance objectives a lot faster, and for your customers?
Yeah, this is an easy one for Leidos, right? If all of the Hashi products came with stamps of approval from one regulatory body or another, that would be fantastic, right? That's not really the world we work in, and that is a bit of a magic wand request. But if every product had NIAP certification attached to it, right, that would make a lot of things easier in the federal space. Okay. Might not be practical, and we get that, right? So we're able to layer in controls to help affect the compliance requirements and achieve certain accreditations. But that would be the easy ask from a big SI like Leidos, is if they came kind of pre-stamped with one authorization or accreditation or another.
Okay.
Yeah, plus one on that for sure.
Yeah. Give us a stamp. Give us the stamp. And I mean, there's a lot of these different ones that are out there. And it's sort of interesting, is because y'all are also in the stream of getting these things certified. Like, any hints on how we get through these programs a little bit faster? Because FedRAMP, a large ask from folks that are out there. You mentioned NIAP. You got IL. There's stuff. Sarah's probably shaking her head. There's like a zillion things that she's worried about over there. Like, what like, if you were to say, like, what are the top priority ones that you would say that would be most helpful? And like, how do we get through that faster from Leidos? I'm asking you specifically because you may have a little bit of a knowledge of how we can get through that and approach it.
I'm not sure I do, honestly, Jake. But look, in the U.S. federal marketplace, at the risk of stating the obvious, right? If it's a managed service, a cloud service, it's got to have a FedRAMP authorization with it, right? Okay. So yes, we know how to help partners get there. We know how to create solutions that achieve that authorization. But remember what I said earlier, when you're an SI, you're dealing with compliance requirements through the lens of every given program that you're working on. And sometimes it's just not feasible, right, so you're trying to seek equivalency. Okay. If you can't achieve the big stamp that you want, then you're after some sort of equivalency, so that when your auditor arrives, you're able to still get through your audit successfully, right? Yeah,
so able to prove out the capabilities. It may not necessarily be the stamp, just kind of lengthens the process of how it is that you get through some of the audits and whatnot.
Yeah, and if you're running like a managed service on something like Google Cloud, for example, a lot of the controls you inherit based at the infrastructure level, right? So a lot of customers that deploy applications, they focus when they're doing through compliance, right? Going through certification process, there's, 400 some controls that they're inheriting from us, right? So, and we have a documented report that we give to customers, and they add it on as an amendment or attachment to their application assessment, right? So, our job again is to make the infrastructure to even if you talk about PAS, PAS certified, compliant as well, and then customers can just focus on making sure their application is attested and certified. So that's where we help out from a provider point of view.
So you can create some inheritance models from the baseline architectures and software that you have and improve those.
Yeah, and we have documented architectures, say, okay, if you follow this architecture, you're almost there from a FedRAMP moderate or high perspective from a compliance point of view.
Understanding that shared responsibility
Exactly, shared
matrix is key,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Well, gentlemen, we're almost at the end here. I don't want to ask another question, have us go over. I really appreciate your time. Usman, Brian, thanks for your insights, and for everybody else for showing up here. If you guys have further questions, we'll probably do a hallway track, and if you have hints on how to get your auditors a little bit more automation sort of minded, please share those with us as well. So thanks, everybody.